The restaurant was alive with soft murmurs and the gentle clinking of glasses. Warm lights cast a golden hue over the polished wooden tables, reflecting off the crystal chandeliers above. The air was filled with the faint aroma of roasted coffee, fresh bread, and the delicate scent of flowers placed carefully on each table. People were dressed elegantly, some in suits and dresses, others in casual attire that still held a touch of sophistication. The atmosphere was welcoming yet carried a sense of expectation, as if the place itself knew that tonight something memorable might happen. In one corner, near a grand piano that gleamed under a soft spotlight, a waitress moved gracefully between tables. She carried a tray with practiced ease, smiling at guests, noting their orders, and handling each request with patience and care. She wore a simple uniform, neat and tidy, her hair pulled back, keeping everything in place so it would not interfere with her work. Though her hands moved quickly, she never seemed rushed, and her eyes held a quiet attentiveness that made each diner feel seen and valued. Among the patrons, a man entered with a confident stride. He wore a tailored suit that fit him perfectly, shoes polished to a mirror shine. There was a certain presence about him that drew attention even without any effort. As he walked through the room, he exchanged nods and polite greetings with the staff and a few familiar faces among the guests. He chose a table near the piano, taking a seat in a way that subtly invited the attention of the room without appearing to demand it. His eyes scanned the space, landing on the waitress who moved with quiet elegance, noticing the careful way she balanced her tray and the subtle grace in her movements. The waitress noticed him as well, though only briefly. She offered a polite nod and a gentle smile, ready to take his order when he waved her over. There was something in his demeanor that suggested he was accustomed to attention, yet it was not overwhelming. He ordered a drink, his tone calm but carrying a hint of amusement, as if he was already anticipating the reactions of those around him. As she noted his order, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of curiosity about him, sensing that he might be different from the usual patrons. The restaurant continued its quiet hum of activity. Couples whispered to each other over candlelight, friends laughed softly across tables, and a few people glanced toward the piano, curious if anyone would play. The waitress carried her tray from one table to another, occasionally pausing to respond to a question or a request. She moved with a rhythm that seemed almost choreographed, each step calculated to avoid disturbing the flow of diners, while still ensuring that everyone felt attended to. There was pride in her work, a satisfaction in knowing that her presence helped create a pleasant and memorable experience for each guest. The man at the piano watched her with a careful interest. He observed how she balanced professionalism with warmth, how she managed to serve the tables efficiently, while still making each interaction feel personal. There was something quietly remarkable about her, something that went beyond her duties. He leaned back slightly in his chair, swirling his drink and imagining what it would be like if she were asked to do something unexpected. A small smile appeared on his face, subtle but unmistakable, hinting at the idea forming in his mind. Meanwhile, the waitress continued her work, unaware of the specific thoughts he held. She approached another table, listened attentively to the guests' needs, and provided suggestions when asked. There was a natural ease in her manner, a way of connecting with people that felt genuine and unforced. Guests responded in kind, offering smiles, words of thanks, and in some cases, light laughter as small conversations unfolded. The restaurant felt like a living organism, each person contributing to the overall rhythm of the evening, each interaction adding a brushstroke to the scene. The grand piano, sitting quietly in its corner, seemed almost to wait in anticipation. Its polished surface reflected the soft lights, and the keys looked inviting yet intimidating to anyone who might consider playing. The man's eyes lingered on it for a moment, imagining the possibility of music filling the room, of the atmosphere shifting in an instant. He glanced at the waitress again, noticing the way she moved, the subtle grace in her posture, and the gentle confidence in her expression. He could sense that she had hidden depths, perhaps talents not immediately visible in the routine of her work. As the evening progressed, the restaurant became a little busier. The gentle hum of conversation grew slightly louder, and the occasional clatter of dishes punctuated the air. Yet there was still a sense of intimacy, a feeling that every person present was part of a shared experience. The waitress moved with steady composure, her focus unwavering even as the room shifted around her. She managed to maintain a calm presence despite the occasional rush of orders, a skill honed through experience and patience. The man, finishing his drink, made a subtle adjustment in his seat, preparing to act on the thought that had been forming. There was a playful glint in his eyes, a readiness to create a moment that would be remembered. He observed the guests, noting their curiosity and the way their attention shifted naturally toward the piano. The stage was set, and though no one knew it yet, the night was about to take an unexpected turn. The waitress, pausing briefly near the piano to refill a water glass for a nearby table, caught a fleeting glance from the man. There was nothing alarming in it, only a hint of interest, a spark that suggested something unusual might be coming. She returned to her duties, continuing with quiet efficiency. Yet a small sense of anticipation seemed to ripple through the air, subtle but present. It was the kind of moment that could change an ordinary evening into something extraordinary. The room's attention, though fragmented among different conversations and activities, began to gather unconsciously toward the piano corner. Some guests noticed the man's focused gaze, the way he seemed to be waiting for a particular moment. Others remained unaware, absorbed in their meals and company. The waitress, still moving gracefully, had yet to realize that she would soon be at the center of an event that no one would forget. In that instant, the elements of the scene, light, sound, movement, and presence, aligned perfectly. The restaurant felt alive, more than a collection of tables and diners. It was a place where something unexpected could happen at any moment, where the ordinary could transform into the remarkable. And at the heart of it all, the man and the waitress, each unaware of the full scope of what was about to unfold, stood on the brink of a moment that would capture the attention and wonder of everyone in the room. The evening continued with its soft rhythms, the sound of cutlery and murmured conversations forming a gentle background. The waitress had just finished serving a couple at a nearby table when she noticed the man near the piano leaning slightly forward, watching her with a faint smile. She felt a brief shiver of curiosity, wondering what he might be thinking. There was a warmth in his gaze, but also a playful spark that made her feel as if something unexpected was about to happen. He raised a hand slightly and gestured toward the piano, as if inviting her over. The gesture was subtle but deliberate. The waitress paused for a moment, holding a tray of drinks, and glanced at the instrument. The piano's polished keys gleamed under the soft light, almost beckoning. Her heart skipped a beat. It was unusual for anyone to ask her to do anything like that, especially in such a public setting. And yet there was something in the man's expression that made it hard to ignore. She approached cautiously, placing the tray down on a nearby table. The guests nearby noticed her movement and turned their heads slightly, curious. Whispers began to rise quietly among the diners, some intrigued, some amused. The man's smile widened, a mixture of challenge and encouragement in his eyes. He was calm but confident, as if he already knew that this was about to become a moment everyone would talk about. "Would you play something for us?" he asked, his voice steady and polite, but carrying a hint of mischief. The question floated through the room, and a hush fell over the nearby tables. Guests paused mid-conversation, and even the kitchen staff seemed to sense the shift in energy. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath. The waitress blinked in surprise. She had served this restaurant for years, and while she had seen patrons react in many ways, she had never been asked to perform in front of such an audience. Her mind raced. She wasn't a professional pianist, at least not publicly, and the thought of everyone watching her made her hands tremble slightly. She opened her mouth to respond but paused, unsure of what to say. The man's gaze remained on her, patient and encouraging. I don't usually play here," she said softly, her voice carrying a mix of hesitation and curiosity. The room seemed to lean in, catching every word. I love music, but I'm not a performer." The man chuckled gently, not in a mocking way but in a way that suggested he understood the moment's tension. "That's all right," he said. "I think it would be wonderful if you just tried. No one expects perfection. Just play for the joy of it." His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that made her consider the possibility. There was no pressure to be flawless, no demand for a grand performance, only an invitation to share a piece of herself. A few of the guests whispered to one another, some nodding, some exchanging curious glances. The atmosphere was light but expectant. The waitress took a slow, steadying breath. Her heart beat faster, but there was also a flicker of excitement. The idea of playing, of sharing something she loved in a space that was usually reserved for routine service, began to feel less intimidating and more thrilling. She moved toward the piano cautiously, her steps quiet on the polished floor. The man remained seated, watching with interest, as if he were waiting to see what she would do. When she reached the instrument, she placed her hands gently over the keys, feeling the smooth surface under her fingertips. It was familiar, yet different in this context, surrounded by diners who now watched with quiet anticipation. For a moment, she hesitated, her fingers hovering above the keys. She glanced at the man, who gave a small nod, encouraging her without words. The room seemed to grow quieter, the soft background hum fading as everyone's attention focused on her. It was not just the man who was intrigued. The diners themselves felt the shift, sensing that something unexpected and memorable was about to unfold. Then, tentatively, she pressed the first note. It was soft, almost hesitant, but clear. The sound echoed gently through the room, drawing a few smiles and soft murmurs of appreciation. She took another breath and allowed her hands to move, recalling the melodies she had played in private, in moments when she felt free and unobserved. Each note grew steadier, more confident, and the music began to fill the space with a quiet beauty. The man leaned slightly forward, a look of genuine interest on his face. He did not interrupt or direct her, merely observed as the music unfolded. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a silent agreement that this moment belonged to her, that she was free to express herself without judgment. It was a rare and beautiful kind of trust, one that made her feel empowered despite her initial nervousness. Guests began to respond subtly at first. Heads turned, eyes widened, and soft smiles appeared as they realized the waitress was creating music that was both unexpected and enchanting. Some whispered to their companions, expressing surprise and admiration. The restaurant's usual rhythm shifted, replaced by the delicate, flowing notes of the piano and the growing sense of wonder in the room. The waitress felt a spark of exhilaration, realizing that the music she loved could touch others even in such a public, unplanned setting. As she played, her confidence grew. Her fingers found familiar patterns, her body relaxed, and her attention moved fully into the music. She was no longer a waitress performing a dare. She was a musician, sharing something deeply personal with everyone present. The man's smile widened subtly, pleased not because of the spectacle, but because he had recognized her hidden talent and given her the opportunity to shine. The atmosphere was electric yet intimate. The restaurant, usually a place of conversation and dining, had transformed into a space of shared experience and wonder. Diners who had been focused on their meals were now immersed in the moment, caught up in the unexpected beauty of music created spontaneously. Some leaned closer to hear better, others sat back in awe, and a few even closed their eyes, letting the notes wash over them. Time seemed to stretch, each note lingering longer than it should, each melody resonating through the room in a way that made ordinary details fade into the background. The waitress lost herself in the music, feeling a freedom she had never known in her routine work. The man watched silently, his initial curiosity now replaced by genuine admiration. He had sparked a moment, yes, but the magic came entirely from her courage and talent. As the last few notes faded, a soft, almost stunned silence fell over the room. Diners exchanged glances, unsure whether to speak or simply absorb what they had witnessed. The waitress lifted her hands from the keys, her chest rising and falling with the rush of adrenaline and relief. She had done it. She had taken the dare and transformed it into something beautiful. The man's eyes met hers again, a quiet nod of acknowledgement and respect passing between them. It was not about winning a bet or proving a point. It was about recognizing talent, encouraging courage, and creating a shared moment that would linger in everyone's memory. The guests began to clap, first softly, then more enthusiastically, until the entire restaurant joined in. Some cheered, some whistled, and the room was filled with genuine admiration for the performance they had just experienced. The waitress smiled, a mixture of pride and humility, feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. She had faced the challenge, embraced it fully, and discovered a new side of herself in the process. The man raised his glass slightly in her direction, a silent toast to courage, talent, and the joy of unexpected moments. In that instant, the ordinary evening had transformed into a story that would be remembered long after the restaurant emptied and the lights dimmed for the night. After the soft applause of her first attempt, the waitress felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. Her hands still tingled from the moment, and her heart raced as she looked around the room. The diners' faces were filled with surprise and admiration, some leaning forward in their chairs to watch more closely, others whispering to each other in awe. She could feel the energy of the room, electric and alive, pressing gently against her nerves, making every small movement feel significant. The piano keys beneath her fingers seemed to hum in anticipation, waiting for her to continue, to fully embrace the moment. The man at the table near the piano leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the surface and clasping his hands together. His eyes held a soft curiosity, and though his expression was calm, there was an undeniable spark of excitement there. He did not speak immediately, allowing the room to breathe in the lingering music, giving the waitress the chance to find her own rhythm. His presence was steadying, a quiet support that made the daunting situation slightly less intimidating. She took a deep breath, trying to steady the fluttering in her chest. Her mind raced with questions she had never faced before in such a public setting. Would she make a mistake? Would the audience judge her? Could she turn this unexpected dare into something meaningful? Each thought threatened to unbalance her, but beneath it all, there was a small, persistent voice urging her forward. She loved music, had always loved it, even if it was only in private moments. Perhaps now, for the first time, she could share that love openly. Her fingers hovered over the keys, hesitant at first, but then she remembered the countless hours she had spent practicing in solitude. The melodies that had lived quietly in her mind and heart were suddenly available to her in the real world. She began to play a simple tune, familiar and comforting, letting the music flow gently, slowly finding its own strength. The first notes were soft, almost shy, but as she continued, they gained confidence, carrying a subtle warmth that began to draw the room closer. The diners leaned in, sensing the transformation. There was a certain magic in watching someone step out of their ordinary role into a moment of pure expression. Some faces showed delight, others surprise, but all were captivated. The waitress noticed a few eyes glistening with emotion, and it bolstered her courage. The music was no longer just notes on a scale. It had become a bridge connecting her to everyone present, a silent conversation that needed no words. The man remained an anchor throughout the performance. He had initiated the dare, yes, but he never forced or pressured. He simply observed, offering subtle encouragement in his calm gaze. That quiet support gave her room to explore her own abilities without fear. She began to allow herself to experiment, letting her fingers wander slightly off the familiar paths, blending delicate chords with light improvisation. The music grew richer, fuller, and with each passing moment, her confidence blossomed. A few diners whispered to each other, unsure if they should speak or merely enjoy the moment. The energy in the room shifted noticeably. It was no longer an ordinary night at a restaurant. It had become something rare, something memorable. The waitress felt it too, a thrill that coursed through her veins. She was aware of every eye on her, yet she felt no fear, only a strange exhilaration. The dare, which had once seemed daunting, had become an opportunity for self-expression, a moment to shine beyond her everyday routine. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the music guide her. Memories of childhood, of quiet evenings spent practicing alone, surfaced. The fear of making mistakes faded as she embraced the joy of playing. Every note was intentional yet free, deliberate yet alive. The room seemed to adjust around her, the soft conversations dying down, replaced by an attentive silence. Each sound resonated, creating a tapestry of emotion that was both delicate and powerful. The man's expression softened further. He had expected a pleasant surprise, but what unfolded was beyond even his imagination. He noticed how naturally she commanded the piano, how she transformed a simple dare into a genuine artistic expression. There was no need for grand gestures or theatrics. The authenticity of the performance held the room spellbound. He realized that he had not simply given a challenge. He had unwittingly unlocked a hidden depth of talent, and witnessing it was both humbling and exhilarating. As she continued to play, the waitress began to feel the emotional weight of the room's attention. It was intense, yes, but not crushing. Instead, it fueled her, giving her a sense of purpose she had rarely felt in such public circumstances. The music flowed from her as if it had always been meant to be shared in this very moment, in this very space. Each chord was infused with a quiet strength, a resilience born from years of practicing in secret, waiting for the right time to emerge. The audience responded in subtle but powerful ways. Small smiles, nods, and whispered compliments began to ripple through the room. Some guests' eyes shone with tears, moved by the unexpected beauty of the performance. Others leaned in, completely captivated by the fluidity of her movements and the emotional depth of the music. The waitress noticed these reactions and allowed herself a quiet moment of pride. She had faced uncertainty and doubt, yet here she was, holding the attention of an entire room with nothing but her talent and courage. Time seemed to slow as she explored the melodies further, weaving in gentle flourishes and nuanced expressions. She became lost in the music, unaware of the exact passage of minutes, yet fully aware of the impact her playing had on those around her. The piano no longer felt like an object. It had become an extension of herself, a medium through which she could communicate directly with everyone present. The dare that had initially felt daunting had transformed into a profound opportunity to connect, to express, and to inspire. The man's eyes followed every movement, not out of expectation, but out of genuine fascination. He admired her bravery, the way she had turned a playful challenge into an evocative performance. He could see the quiet determination in her posture, the subtle way she let the music guide her hands, and he felt a deep appreciation for the courage it took to step into the spotlight unprepared yet fully committed. The moment had shifted from a casual dare into a shared experience of beauty and vulnerability. With each passing measure, the waitress felt a growing sense of liberation. The nervousness that had once gripped her was replaced by a flowing confidence. She began to incorporate subtle variations, gentle crescendos, and tender pauses that added depth to her playing. The music began to tell a story of its own, one of quiet courage, hidden talent, and the joy of embracing unexpected opportunities. The room responded intuitively, caught in the unfolding narrative without fully realizing it. The diners' engagement grew more pronounced. Some tilted their heads, listening intently to each chord, while others exchanged looks of wonder. The atmosphere was no longer merely that of a restaurant. It had become a small theater, a space where art and emotion intertwined seamlessly. The waitress felt the weight of every eye, every ear, and yet it did not intimidate her. Instead, it propelled her forward, encouraging her to give her full attention to the music and the emotions it evoked. The man, satisfied and genuinely impressed, allowed himself a small, contented smile. He had hoped to create a memorable moment, and it had happened in a way that was far more remarkable than he had imagined. The waitress performance was not only skillful but heartfelt, and he knew that the evening had become a rare instance where courage and talent intersected in perfect harmony. He felt a quiet pride in recognizing her potential and giving her the subtle push needed to reveal it. As the music approached a natural pause, the waitress felt a surge of accomplishment. She had navigated her hesitation, embraced her talent, and transformed a simple dare into an experience that captivated everyone present. The room held its collective breath for a moment, anticipating the conclusion. And then, as she played the final notes, a soft, resonant silence followed. It was a silence filled with awe, appreciation, and an unspoken recognition of what had just transpired. For a few heartbeats, no one spoke. Then, slowly, the diners began to applaud, first softly, then with growing enthusiasm. The energy in the room shifted from anticipation to admiration. Some guests cheered, others clapped their hands together, and a few even whistled. The applause was not only for the music itself but for the courage it took to play, for the transformation of a simple challenge into something extraordinary. The waitress lifted her hands from the keys, her chest heaving slightly, feeling a blend of exhaustion, exhilaration, and quiet pride. She had faced uncertainty, embraced the challenge, and in doing so, had revealed a hidden brilliance that no one, not even she, had fully realized before. The applause that followed the initial performance faded into a quiet, expectant atmosphere. The waitress sat at the piano, her fingers lightly resting on the keys, heart still racing, but her mind now focused entirely on the music. She realized that the moment had grown beyond a simple dare. It had become an opportunity to express herself fully, to let the music speak for her in a way words never could. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a second, and began to play again, this time with more intention, more confidence. The first notes were firm and clear, setting a rhythm that gradually expanded into a melody that filled the room with warmth. Each chord she struck seemed to resonate with the diners, creating an almost tangible connection. The man at the nearby table watched with rapt attention. His posture relaxed but his gaze fixed on her every movement. There was a subtle pride in his eyes, not because he had dared her, but because he could see the courage and talent she displayed. He knew that this moment would be remembered, not just by him, but by everyone present. As she played, her fingers danced across the keys with growing confidence. She incorporated gentle flourishes, pauses that added emotion, and subtle changes in tempo that made the melody alive. The music was no longer hesitant or cautious. It had become a story, a reflection of her thoughts and feelings, woven into every note. The audience, initially curious and cautious, now leaned forward, completely absorbed. Conversations ceased, and even the clatter of cutlery seemed to fade into the background. It was as if the restaurant had been transformed into a private concert hall, and she was the master of the stage. A few diners closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Some smiled softly, some looked at one another in shared wonder, and a few sat in quiet awe, unable to speak. The waitress noticed these reactions and felt a growing surge of pride and exhilaration. Each note she played seemed to carry her nervousness away, replaced by a sense of freedom and joy. She was no longer performing a dare. She was creating a moment of beauty and emotion that everyone in the room could feel. The man, who had sparked this moment with his quiet challenge, allowed himself a small, contented smile. He did not need to speak or encourage. His presence alone seemed to provide the reassurance she needed. He had recognized her potential and given her a gentle nudge, but the magic had come entirely from her courage and talent. Watching her, he felt a deep appreciation for the power of small gestures and the impact they could have when combined with hidden abilities. The melody grew more complex, weaving intricate patterns that revealed her skill and the depth of her musical understanding. She added subtle variations, shifting dynamics from soft, gentle passages to richer, fuller chords. The audience responded intuitively, leaning in to catch every nuance, hanging on each pause and crescendo. The energy in the room was palpable, a shared experience that transcended the ordinary dining environment. Guests were no longer merely observers. They were participants in the unfolding story of her music. The waitress allowed herself a brief moment to glance at the diners. She saw wide eyes, soft smiles, and a few expressions that seemed almost mesmerized. Her confidence surged further, knowing that the risk she had taken by accepting the dare had resulted in such a powerful connection. The music became more fluid, each note carrying intention and feeling. It was no longer simply about playing correctly. It was about communicating, expressing, and connecting with every person in the room through sound. A few moments passed in this quiet intensity. Then, feeling a sense of release, she began to bring the performance to a gentle conclusion. Her fingers moved with grace and precision, weaving the final notes into a soft, lingering melody that seemed to hover in the air for a heartbeat longer than expected. The silence that followed was not awkward but reverent, a pause for everyone to absorb the beauty they had witnessed. It was a collective exhale, a moment of shared acknowledgement of the courage and skill that had transformed the evening. When the first hands clapped, they were tentative, almost shy, as if the diners were unsure if it was appropriate to break the quiet. Then, one by one, the applause grew louder, spreading across the room until it was a chorus of admiration and celebration. Guests stood, clapping, cheering, some even whistling, their reactions genuine and heartfelt. The waitress lifted her hands from the keys, breathing heavily, a mixture of relief, pride, and joy coursing through her. She had not only faced the dare but had turned it into a performance that left a lasting impression. The man raised his glass in a subtle gesture of acknowledgement, a quiet toast to her courage and talent. He understood that the evening had shifted from an ordinary night to a memorable story of discovery, risk, and reward. He did not need to speak. The music and the applause spoke for itself. His eyes met hers briefly, conveying respect, admiration, and a hint of satisfaction in seeing the impact of a simple dare transformed into a moment of shared human experience. The audience slowly began to settle, though the energy of the performance lingered. Conversations resumed in softer tones, but there was a sense of lingering awe. People continued to glance at the piano, at the waitress, and at the man who had encouraged her, as if wanting to hold onto the magic for just a little longer. The waitress sat back, smiling softly, feeling a warmth that had little to do with the applause and everything to do with the courage she had summoned and the connection she had created. For a brief time, she allowed herself to reflect on what had just happened. The fear that had once gripped her had been replaced by exhilaration. The room, filled with strangers, had become a space of shared emotion and admiration. She had embraced the challenge, allowed her talent to shine, and in doing so, had touched the hearts of everyone present. It was a rare and profound experience, one that would remain with her long after the evening ended. The man stood for a moment, clapping along with the rest of the diners. His actions were subtle, not seeking attention, but full of genuine appreciation. He had seen something remarkable, not just in the music, but in the courage it took to transform a simple dare into an unforgettable performance. The respect and admiration in the room were not only for the music itself but for the bravery and authenticity that had allowed it to emerge. The waitress finally rose from the piano, a modest smile on her face, and returned to her duties. The room continued to hum with quiet excitement, guests still exchanging words of wonder and admiration. Even as she moved between tables again, there was a noticeable shift in how people treated her, a newfound respect and recognition that had been earned not through her usual work, but through the courage to embrace a moment and let her hidden talent shine. As the evening progressed, the restaurant maintained its gentle rhythm, but the memory of the performance lingered in the air. The man at the table near the piano sipped his drink, observing the scene with quiet satisfaction. He had sparked something unexpected, and the results were far beyond anything he could have imagined. The waitress continued her work with a lightness in her step, a quiet pride in her heart, knowing she had faced uncertainty, embraced the challenge, and transformed a simple moment into something extraordinary. The experience had left a mark on everyone present. Guests would remember the evening not just for the meal, but for the music, the courage, and the unexpected beauty that had unfolded. For the waitress, it was a turning point, a reminder that stepping beyond comfort and embracing opportunity could reveal hidden strengths and talents. And for the man, it was a confirmation that sometimes the smallest gestures, a simple dare, a gentle nudge, could inspire extraordinary outcomes and create memories that would last long after the night had ended. The room was still buzzing softly with excitement as the last notes of her performance faded into memory. The applause had settled into murmurs of admiration, but the energy remained, almost tangible, hanging over the tables like a warm, invisible light. Guests were still talking in low tones, their faces reflecting a mix of astonishment and delight. Some whispered to one another, reliving the moments of her music, while others simply sat back, savoring the emotions the performance had stirred within them. The waitress returned to her usual duties, carrying a tray with drinks and food, but the way she moved had changed subtly. Her steps were lighter, her posture more assured, and her eyes held a spark that had not been there before. She smiled at the diners, who returned the gesture with renewed respect and warmth. For the first time, she felt recognized not just as a waitress, but as someone with talent, courage, and the ability to inspire. Each glance and nod from the patrons reinforced a sense of pride she had never allowed herself to feel so openly. The man, who had initiated the dare, observed quietly from his seat near the piano. He did not need to say anything. His calm presence alone conveyed his admiration. He had sparked a moment, yes, but the outcome had exceeded any expectation. Watching the waitress navigate her nerves, embrace her hidden talent, and create such beauty had left him quietly amazed. There was a deep satisfaction in witnessing someone rise beyond self-imposed limits, and he felt privileged to have been a small part of that journey. Some diners approached her as she carried trays between tables, offering words of praise and gentle congratulations. A few asked questions about her experience with music, curious to learn more about the talent that had emerged so unexpectedly. The waitress responded with a mix of humility and warmth, her voice soft but steady. She explained that music had always been a private passion, something she practiced quietly, never imagining it would one day fill a room in such a powerful way. The guests listened intently, captivated not only by her skill but by the honesty and sincerity she radiated. The atmosphere remained intimate despite the excitement. Conversations flowed naturally, punctuated by occasional laughter and expressions of wonder. The restaurant felt transformed, no longer merely a place to eat, but a shared space where emotion, courage, and human connection had intertwined. Patrons lingered longer than usual, reluctant to leave the feeling behind, and even the staff moved with a subtle sense of awe, recognizing the extraordinary event that had taken place within their familiar environment. The waitress took a moment to breathe deeply, pausing near the piano to rest her hands on the keys. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the emotions of the evening settle within her. The fear she had felt earlier now seemed distant, replaced by a quiet confidence and a deep sense of fulfillment. The applause, the smiles, the admiration, they were not simply for her music but for the bravery it had taken to embrace the challenge. She had discovered a new part of herself, one that had been waiting quietly for the right moment to emerge. The man stood slowly, his movements unassuming but deliberate. He approached the piano, offering a gentle nod of respect and a small smile that conveyed admiration and approval. There was no need for words. The performance and the reactions of everyone in the room said more than anything could. He had witnessed not just talent, but courage, authenticity, and the transformative power of stepping beyond comfort zones. For him, the moment was a reminder of how small acts of encouragement could reveal extraordinary qualities in others. As the evening continued, the restaurant maintained its rhythm, yet the magic lingered in the air. Guests shared stories of the performance, some recalling the precise way her fingers moved across the keys, others remembering the expression of joy and vulnerability on her face. The narrative of the evening had shifted from an ordinary night to a memory that would be retold with enthusiasm. The waitress, aware of the impact she had created, moved with a quiet grace, balancing her responsibilities with the satisfaction of having achieved something remarkable. Several patrons approached her to ask if she played regularly, genuinely interested in hearing more. She explained again, with humility, that this had been a rare opportunity and that she usually enjoyed music privately. Each response she received reinforced the idea that sharing one's passion could create profound connections. She felt grateful for the encouragement, for the way the audience had embraced her performance, and for the man who had dared her to step into the spotlight. The simple challenge had led to a moment that resonated far beyond her expectations. The man returned to his seat, picking up his drink with a quiet, satisfied smile. He observed the diners and the waitress with a sense of contentment. It was rare to witness such authenticity, and he knew that the night had become a shared story, one that would linger in the memories of everyone present. The experience had reminded him of the power of trust and subtle encouragement, of how small gestures could unlock hidden potential and create moments of genuine human connection. The evening gradually drew toward its natural close, yet the impact of the performance remained palpable. Diners lingered, expressing thanks to the staff, complimenting the food, and recounting the extraordinary event to companions. The waitress, though returning to her regular work, carried a sense of pride and self-awareness that could not be diminished by routine tasks. She had faced the unknown, embraced her talent, and created a shared experience that had touched hearts and lifted spirits. In the final moments, as the restaurant prepared to close for the night, the man stood again and offered a quiet nod toward the waitress, acknowledging her courage and talent one last time. She returned the gesture with a smile that spoke volumes, a silent exchange of respect and gratitude. The evening had begun as a casual night of dining and ended as a celebration of courage, talent, and the power of seizing unexpected opportunities. As the guests departed, they carried with them the memory of the performance, the emotional resonance, and the sense of connection that had filled the room. The restaurant, though returning to its normal quiet state, retained an intangible warmth, a reminder that extraordinary moments could occur when courage met opportunity. The waitress continued her duties until the last guest left, feeling a quiet fulfillment that would linger long after the lights were dimmed and the doors were closed. The man left soon after, his steps measured and calm, carrying the satisfaction of having witnessed something rare and beautiful. He had dared someone to take a chance, but the result was far beyond any expectation. A reminder of how hidden talent and courage could transform ordinary moments into something unforgettable. For both of them, the night had become a story of inspiration, human connection, and the simple, yet profound, impact of stepping beyond comfort and embracing opportunity. In the quiet aftermath, the waitress allowed herself a moment to reflect. She had discovered a new level of confidence, a renewed sense of pride in her abilities, and the joy of sharing her passion. The memory of the applause, the eyes of the diners, and the silent encouragement of the man would remain with her, a testament to the courage it took to act on a dare and the beauty that could emerge when one chose to embrace the unknown. The night had been transformed, ordinary moments had become extraordinary, and she had become a part of a story that would be remembered and cherished by all who had witnessed it.